Hey, this is Max and I'm one of the co-founders of GraphCDM. We're currently doing a couple of team interviews. In fact, both Thomas and I are actually sitting in Lisbon, Portugal right now at our offsite. He's like a couple rooms behind me, trying to make the audio as good as it can be. My guest today is Thomas Heyenbrock, one of our software engineers who comes to us from another data science startup in Germany. And we got to know him a while back, and he's been here, I think, I don't even know, it's maybe almost 6 months.
It's gonna be 6 months, yeah.
Wow, shit, time flies. Time flies when you're having fun, as I always say. And right now, really, just like everybody at GraphCDM, all of the engineers kind of wear all of the hats, right? I think everybody works across front-end, back-end integrations, basically across the entire full stack of the product. And then Thomas also did a lot of work on our dashboards internally and wrote some gnarly SQL queries, gnarly SQL queries that really everybody was like, how did you even make those work? So Thomas, I know that you originally have a math background. Take us back to those days, and how did that math background lead you, or maybe it didn't, but how did that lead to you to programming eventually?
Yes, that's a nice start. I think I always was like good at math in school and stuff, and it got me really interested. Also like the more advanced stuff, not just like what you do in school, which is like fairly basic compared to when you then get into university and see what real math is like. But I was really interested in probably, I would call it problem solving actually. And math was just like the way, or the most kind of pure way in school that they teach you how to solve problems, basically. So that's how I got hooked on math and studied it in university, did my bachelor's degree. I really enjoyed the basics during university. And branching off of those, there's like a lot of advanced stuff and a lot of different things that you can do in math. Which I found not as interesting anymore, or it was like it was like only certain parts which I really found interesting. And that's why after I finished my bachelor's degree, I decided not to continue with the master's degree in maths. I at the same time, like in my second to last semester, I had to do an internship, which led me to Finanzchef, the company that you call the data science startup, which is not at all true actually. I wouldn't call it a data science startup. I basically started there doing product management actually. In hindsight, it was more like the work that I actually did was more like content management, but story for another time. And I really enjoyed, like at that point, I have never like done a real work before, like just like stupid stuff to earn some money, but nothing with a real purpose. Let's say it like that. And I really enjoyed it. And in particular, also continuing solving problems, I turned out to be I had quite fun doing a lot of the like business analysis and business intelligence stuff there, which was still math heavy, of course, but a very different kind of applying it to solve real life problems. And that's basically how I switched more into this data science track that you already mentioned. And I tried to apply for a master's degree in data science, but I was rejected.
Really?
Yes, I was rejected because they specifically asked for some computer science stuff that you had to do before that in order to be like able to apply. And I was not at all into computer science when I started with my math studies. Actually, you could take like one additional subject. I chose physics, and not. You could also have chosen computer science. If I had done that, I probably would have slipped right into the master's degree. But well, then I decided to do a 3-semester long, like it's not a real degree, I guess. It was just like the basics of computer science. Basically, you just get a certificate kind of thing once I was done with that. Basically, then with the idea of okay, once I got this, I can still like look into the master's degree for data science. In the meantime, while I did this, the company, still the same company where I was at, tried to win me over to start full-time. And basically at that point, I was already like studying for almost 5 years, and I was actually quite done with it, having exams every other 6 months. So I decided, yeah, let's do it. And that's how I got started working there. And also, like in parallel to that, I really like the more I got into doing the business intelligence stuff already as a intern and as a working student, the more I also had to dig into programming. And at the same time, a friend of mine who I'm at the same skiing club, who also studied like something related to programming kind of, said, hey, our website is shit for our skiing club, let's do a new one. And I said like, okay, yeah, well, let's do it. So we both zero to none experience with web development at all, hacked together a really ugly PHP site. I'd really like to see again how it looked like. It was really bad. Also, like the design was crap. But yeah, that's how I got into web programming. My company, I also told the stories of that at my company, and yeah, that's how they motivated me more and more to also start doing stuff like that at my work, because they were also like always searching for new engineers, which are quite hard to get, especially since we were a German speaking company. So at that time, we were limited to just hiring German-speaking engineers, which cuts down the workforce like substantially. So that's how I got more and more into programming. And then we also started doing React at the company, and style components, and basically a really modern stack, using a really modern tech stack. And also, of course, started doing GraphQL. Like that's also how I then got into GraphQL. And yeah, I think I'll leave it there now. I've been talking for already 5 minutes. Like that was the short story of how a math student ended up doing software development.
I love that. That actually really resonates with me. I didn't study math, but I got into web programming very much the same way. Or actually, I got into programming kind of the same way, where we in school, not in university, so just in high school, we had to, as part of just the IT class, right? Like we had an IT class where we learned things like Excel and Word and whatever, just the basics of how to use a computer. And as part of that, every student had to build a small like personal website for themselves, right? And there was like a section on the sort of school website where you could click through and you could see everybody's personal website. And of course, you start off just having like a list of facts, right? It's just like a UL and with lots of LIs in it, right? It's just like very basic HTML. And then I kind of like really felt like I wanted to make this much better. Like I had this longing to make this a much more personal space. And so I did all of the terrible CSS things that you can think of. Like I just Googled everything, and I had like marquees everywhere. I had like blinks everywhere. I had like super ugly image backgrounds, like green text, the whole thing.
You know, when I started building this first website, I couldn't get what the difference is between JavaScript and jQuery. For me, it was like the same thing. Because I was just Googling and read the term on the one Stack Overflow thread and the other term on the next one. So yeah, that took me quite a while to figure out.
Yeah, I remember those days way back when jQuery was basically still JavaScript. And then also, I actually learned React at my first internship. Similar to what you just said, the company I was at there just started using, or actually didn't even start using React, but wanted to use React. And they just put me on a project and were like, look, just try building this with React, right? And then let us know how it goes. And so that's really how I got into React. So that really resonates with me. With your sort of background of like this maths bachelor, but then sort of switching, I don't even know if that's a switch, but like getting more into data science, do you wish you had a data science degree at any point? Do you feel like that's necessary in order to be effective at data science at a company? Or do you feel like you could learn anything on the job anyway? Or was the math background maybe enough to cover it?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. I guess it wasn't like that. I was never at the point where I said I now intentionally make the switch from doing math to doing data science. It was like more a fluent transition from one to the other. I think I learned for sure everything I know about programming I learned by not at university. I just learned by doing it either at work or for fun. So you can get very far without needing any kind of university degree for these kind of things. I guess it's the same for data science. You can, in terms of like the practical stuff that you actually need when doing it at work, you can learn a lot of that without going to university. I still think that going to university is advantageous because no matter if it's now data science or computer science, for the record, I can't actually like really speak for data science because I didn't study it after all. But I can speak for computer science, and I think the concepts you learn in university, like even if it sounds boring to study algorithms or databases, like still having or learning these concepts, not like in terms of needing learning how to do SQL queries. You can learn it by yourself, but the concepts and the ideas behind it, I felt like they at some point also help me when I think about how should I solve a given problem. Just thinking about different like ideas around how to do databases helps me to maybe also choose the one that's suited best for my case, like just to give an example. But I think still it's nothing in the end that you need to go to university to. If you really want to learn that stuff, I mean, it's all written down in books. University also just like basically choose the books from which to teach from. So I think you can basically go full on and have a very successful and productive career without studying at a university. That's just my opinion.
I absolutely agree. I didn't study, and I actually, in hindsight, I think it's interesting how often I learn things that I would have learned at university. You know, it's almost like now I have to do JIT learning, I have to do just-in-time learning, right? It's like I have to know what I don't know. And when you don't study at university, you don't have this like broad-ranging view of everything that you really need to know, right? Like the whole point of university is they give you this super big baseline, right? This super good foundation where you just algorithms, data structures, CPUs, right? Like all of this stuff you just know, and then you can build upon that. And when, as a self-taught developer, right, I started studying and I really didn't like it because for me it was too mathy, right? I really wanted to build websites. I was really into building websites, right? I did not care about manipulating binary numbers and all of that stuff. And now with like, you know, 8-9 years of experience, it's often come up that actually a lot of those topics are super interesting, right? Particularly algorithms and data structures come up over and over and over and over again all the time. And I just sort of had to just in time learn it. And the downside of that is that you need to know what you don't know, right? If you don't know what you don't know, then you can't look it up when you need it, right? Because you have no clue what's out there. And so actually a lot of what I did was sort of reading almost like, you know, almost like the chapter like headings of various books, not because I wanted to learn those specific things, but just because I wanted to be aware of what I don't know, so that when I'm sitting there and I'm like, I have this problem, I can at least think, I heard that this thing exists, maybe I could use that, maybe I should learn about that. And often it turns out that it's totally the wrong thing because I have no clue what it is, right? But often it also turns out that it's just something that I need right in that moment. So that really resonates, and I agree, right? Like you don't need to study. I still think that university actually gives you a really good baseline.
Yeah, it's probably the more efficient way, like to learn about everything. Yeah, it depends. Like just in time, as you like described it, is probably faster in terms of getting to something that you can use in some kind of work environment where you can actually build something. But the longer your career progresses and the more things you need to get to know, or need to get to know that you don't know anything about them. In that terms, probably studying is more efficient because you learn a lot of the stuff up front that saves you time later on.
Yeah, I'd agree, actually. I would 100% agree. Long term, definitely saves you a lot of time. In terms of you were at Finanzchef, right? And you started using React and you started using GraphQL. What did you think about using GraphQL, right? It's sort of a self-taught developer almost, right? You're coming into this and they're starting to use this really modern stack. How did you learn that stack? There's so many, ways to learn all of these modern stacks. This is, I think, where university sort of, I don't want to say falls short, but I think that's like just where it stops naturally, right? It's like all of these modern topics university can't cover because they just cover the very baseline, right? And then all these modern topics you sort of have to learn yourself. So how did you learn those topics? And when you learned them, what did you think about them? What do you think about React and GraphQL and sort of this very modern stack?
In hindsight, I did a lot of, I would call it like hype-driven development, what I did. Actually, now that I think about it again, I think I actually used GraphQL for the same skiing club website, which I rebuilt, I guess, 10 times afterwards. It maybe was even 2015 or like 2016. So really, really early, just because it was hyped at the moment, like just being open sourced by Facebook in 2015. And I was immediately jumping on it, like because it's new, it's hip. There was like articles being written about it at a daily pace. So I feel like, especially in the beginning, I jumped a lot on those hot things, which generated a lot of buzz. I like in terms of how I learned them. One thing I just mentioned, like using them to rebuild the same website 10 times, or just like building fun projects, which took up a lot of my my free time actually. But like it didn't feel that way for me because I was really interested in learning, and like I gained. Like it was fun, and for me it was also like fulfilling to master it and to build something with it that's actually working. Wasn't something that anybody would ever use apart from myself, but still that gave me really like a sense of you got this, you mastered this, at least to a certain degree, or you made it work. It's a whole different thing when we started doing React at Finanzchef and like rebuilding in this modern stack. By the way, before that we used AngularJS, so that was like my first actual JavaScript framework that I got to interact with, and I thought it was really cool at the time. Then we started actually because there was one developer like I didn't even get to know, who like did all the front end work before that, and once he left, nobody knew really how to work with this project, which became basically legacy from one day to the next day after that person was gone. And then the company decided to invest in a more modern stack and to rebuild the front-end application. By the way, we were building a comparison website for business insurance. So it was like basically this whole funnel of going through questionnaires and then comparing a list of rates, of insurance rates, and then picking one and checking out with it. That was basically the application that we were talking about, and was designed as a single page application to just be fast as heck. And then there's actually a new person coming in, quite experienced developer, who already knew a lot about React, and I really picked up a lot of things by just working with more experienced developers in general at work. Not in a in an intentional learning session by having this kind of formal teaching, you sitting there and another person sitting in front of you telling you concepts, what to do, whatever, but just the habit of building things, and also a lot of pull request reviews, getting rapid feedback and the work that that I was doing, even if it was 20, 30 change requests on the first pull requests that I submitted. That was really a good source of learning for me, and I figured I probably didn't make the same mistake twice or even 3 times a lot. So the more I got to work with the other people who had way more experience around me, the more I picked up and learned from that, and at the same time, the more I learned what you also said, what I didn't know yet, or even more things to look at, and that gave me basically an infinite amount of new side project ideas, which I could go through one at a time. But at some point, it actually got then it's probably a very common experience for people who get into web development these days. Is you start off maybe learning React or Vue or Svelte or whatever library or framework you choose, and really basically you get very fast or get very far very fast, but on the way you pick up, oh, there's this thing, I don't know about it yet, and there's this thing, and suddenly there's so many things around you that this feeling of fatigue sets in, that there's so many new things coming at you, and you just don't know how should I ever look at all these things and master all of this, and then at some point you realize that you don't have to, because a lot of it is coming back to hype-driven development. A lot of it is basically all resolving the same problem that 10 other libraries already solved before, that just in a slightly different way, or having a slightly different way of approaching the same problem. And at some point it's just about for me it was just about to pick the things that really sounded interesting, or bringing something new to the table, and separating that from the rest of the things that were just a bit of hype, but I felt okay, I don't gain anything if I now take a day or two to look into this, and just ignored it, basically.
I actually had a conversation with Sean Wong, who's currently at Temporal, on Twitter about this, because he tweeted something to the effect of, his unpopular opinion is that actually GitHub stars are an indicator of traction. And I thought, it's kind of true, but also kind of not. I think actually, to me, what I look at is sort of the spread between GitHub stars and downloads, right? For example, on NPM, because to me, GitHub stars is like a leading indicator of hype. If you can generate hype, people will start your project, even if they don't yet use it. But then once they start using it, you start seeing more and more downloads, and your downloads will grow. The GraphQL downloads are growing like mad, right? It's doubled again in the last year. And GitHub, GraphQL also has a lot of stars on GitHub, and so you have this sort of knowledge of, okay, this is a project that is widely used, right? It has a lot of downloads, and the people that use it, they like it because they star it. There's no lot of dislike of the project, and it isn't some fundamental building block that nobody knows even exists, like the famous left pad package that broke the internet a while back. And to me, it's all about that spread, right? And often when new open source projects get launched, and then you look back 6 months later, maybe they got a lot of stars initially, but their downloads are pretty much flat, right? And of course, I'm there's many examples of both that and the opposite, where they get a lot of stars and they get a lot of downloads. But that to me is like where stars are sort of like a leading indicator of hype that can demonstrate value, but it's really only if you look at it combined with the NPM downloads that you get that full picture of like, okay, is this actually sort of widely used in the industry? I think the other point that really resonated was about the code reviews. I learned so much through working with more experienced people than me, and not because they came to me, they were like, I want to teach you something, right? Just like I said, nobody ever did that to me. Nobody ever sat down and was like, now we're going to do a teaching session, we're going to teach you X, Y, Z. It was just through code reviews, they sort of passed their knowledge and their opinions on. And I learned a ton through just getting really good code reviews. And often I wouldn't quite know where the comment was coming from, right? It was like, oh, maybe try changing it to this, right? Maybe try approaching the problem from this angle. And I was like, I don't know why, but let me try that. Yeah. And often through trying it, you understand, oh, actually, this is much better in these and that ways, right? And I've now learned, I tried to approach it in this way, but actually this way has these and these benefits. And I think as I've gotten more senior in my engineering career, I've come to realize that pretty much all of code reviews is just opinions, right? Ultimately, what matters is that you ship the thing that solves the problem for the user. But there's a lot of opinions that have good reasons, right? And every choice you make in programming has a trade-off. Nothing is ever a silver bullet, nothing is ever perfect. It applies to the big things like open source projects, and it applies to the really small things like what you call your variables or whether you define them with let and const, right? There is no right answer. Very rarely. Usually it boils down to you're choosing a set of trade-offs, right? It's like, do I want this trade-off or do I want that trade-off? What fits in the context of my project and the problem that I'm trying to solve? And very often I found that actually just thinking about it from that angle, I can often make a really informed decision on how I want to build this thing, right? How do I want to architect it? Which decision do I want to make? Just thinking about, what are the upsides and the downsides of all the different choices that I have.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I feel like the interesting thing is everybody has his own opinions on stuff, and that also, like, when I got into this, I basically got feedback from very few people and basically assimilated their opinions just by getting feedback from them through code reviews. And once I started, or like other engineers joined the company who brought in other, like also, of course, very valid opinions. As you said, it's just about the trade-offs. I started noticing, okay, maybe the thing I thought was universally basically right isn't that right, actually. And also a lot of alignment happened during these review or feedback in general processes, which is a very interesting team dynamic. I also now went through when I switched and joined GraphCDN again, because I started working with people I did not know at all before. And it's always the same. Everybody brings his opinions to the table, and you also have, as a team, then the challenge to find the trade-offs and choose how do we want to build this thing as a team, so that everybody's kind of happy and can align with that. Very interesting.
Absolutely agree. I think we talk a lot about diversity at GraphCDN, right? And I think we really value it because all of those different backgrounds, all of those different lived experiences, and it's not even, about your skin color, about your sexual orientation, about whatever. It's really about your background. Which experiences can you bring to the company that nobody else here has, right? What can you add to the culture that nobody else has yet laid down on the table, right? Which experiences have you lived that you've now internalized that other people haven't even considered, right? And I think often that's where a lot of conversation happens around feedback, right? Around how do we want to approach this? And people just bring their entire context, all of their lived experience into that conversation. And ultimately, if there's a baseline, the baseline that needs to exist is just wanting to make the best decision. And as long as that baseline is a given, you can then look at you can put all of these other lived experiences on the table, right? You can look at all of them in like, okay, this is everything we've got here. These are all the opinions we've got. These are all the experiences we've got. Now let's figure out what choice do we make for our team? What actually fits the team? And that's a big reason why we value diversity so much, particularly, just in every aspect of the company. because the more experiences we have on the table, the better the decision is that we can make at the end, right? Like obviously, right? If we know more of the options, we're gonna make a way better decision and way more informed.
Yeah, it's obvious in hindsight always. Like for me, it wasn't obvious at all when starting out. But yeah, now also by joining GraphCD, and this is in a lot of ways very different from everything what I've seen before, and it's again a big opportunity for me to learn and also to grow, and to connect with more people and to get to know different opinions that I've never heard before.
Exactly. So let's actually get into that. So you're at Finanzchef. You're eventually become the head of analytics there. You're doing, I think, both data science on the one side, but also a little bit of programming on the other side. How do you find GraphCD, and what did sort of maybe motivated you to apply to work here and wanting to come to GraphCD?
Yeah. So as you correctly assessed, I basically had a kind of a split role at Finanzchef, where I basically, my original role was still doing business intelligence, and yeah, so it was a lot about reporting, but also I try to push more into how can we also use the insights that we use for our reports to build a better product on top of them. So that's also why I basically got this head of analytics title, because I pushed really hard in for that. On the other hand, at the same time, I still did a lot of programming, and especially after we rebuilt our front end there in React, I had a lot of stake in that and a lot of knowledge about the project and the decisions that were made when we started out doing it. And basically this split role was at some points quite difficult to manage because it involved a lot of context switching, and I basically at some points I had to basically come up with extra time to fulfill all of the priorities that we had in two different areas, which was at some points quite exhausting. I tried to move more away from the programming side of things and more into the analytics side of things, but it wasn't. I didn't feel like that at that point in time, I didn't feel like that it's really possible, because I still carried a lot of that knowledge. In hindsight, I could have been more strict about that if I would have just been more more hardcore, like saying I won't do this I don't want to do this anymore. I want to switch my attention fully on the analytics side of things. That would have probably been the better option, but it's also, I learned, I mean, in hindsight it all sounds so easy, but at that point in time I felt like there's no way possible I can let go. At this point in time, I guess was June last year, June 2021, when GraphCDN launched, and I heard about it on Twitter, I guess. Immediately, also share, as we were quite invested in GraphQL, immediately shared it in our in some Teams channel. Didn't use Slack, unfortunately, but yeah, that's how I got to know GraphCDN. And I think I also tried it out pretty quickly after that, just trying to see how it works, what is in there, how does it look like, and stuff like that. I think maybe then a week or two after that, after the initial launch, was one of these phases where I felt really in between two chairs again. And funnily enough, I actually at that point had to solve a similar problem at work, because we were not tracking all our users anymore with Google Analytics because of GDPR reasons, where we try to be very strict and fulfilling all the requirements. But like we didn't know the whole truth anymore. Just by the fact of that we were not tracking 30 or 40% of our users. And what I tried to do in that time, just like more as a proof of concept, was to try use our server logs, which also included all the GraphQL logs, which in turn told us very precisely which user visited this or that page and did this or that action, because like everything substantially triggered a GraphQL request to our servers. And when I saw GraphCDN, I immediately thought, wow, that's amazing. That would like basically an evolution of already your first analytics product would have already like could have solved that use case. And I was really like thinking that there's a lot of potential in this thing. Like, of course, you did all the caching, and that was probably like the more exciting part for a whole lot of other users. But for me, it was like the analytics thing where I was like, wow, this is really cool. You could really do awesome stuff by sitting at the edge between your clients and your server. And at that point, there was no official job posting or anything yet. You were just like, I think you wrote something like that you're planning to grow the team, and just like leave an email or write us an email if you're in any kind of way interested in that. And I basically then did just that. I wrote an email. I don't know specifically if I wrote it to you or to like any generic GraphCDN email, but I think it didn't. It just took 2 hours, and you already replied to my email and said like, "Hey, sounds interesting. Let's have a chat. Just book a spot on my calendar." And yeah, that's how we got talking, I guess. And one technical interview, one values interview later, I had an offer at the table. And yeah, was quite the hard decision for me to take, because I really I still enjoyed working at my last company, and I also still felt like I could really also achieve a lot of things there. In the end, I think the point or the thing that really convinced me was that I was already like 6.5 years at my at the previous company at Finanzchef, and I always said like I would spend the rest of my days at this one company. There will be a point where I'm also like want to see something different, and then I figured, okay, now it's this point, and now let's try something different. Let's try something new, and then I accepted. And now, half a year later, we're sitting here and doing this podcast.
Nice. I remember when you applied, and Tim and I looked at each other and we were like, there's this application from somewhere near Munich, from this guy that works at Finanzchef, this company we've heard about, but didn't really know that they like were super technical. And what really appealed to us and why we replied so quickly actually was because you were like, I totally see the problem that this solves. I want to work on this, right? And that to me is like a lot of building dev tools. We're building tools for engineers, right? Most of the users that sign up to GraphCDN, they're engineers or they're managers, right? That's basically our target audience. And so, and for an engineer to come there and be like, I really like this idea. I have some really interesting ideas. I really want to work on this, right? That to us was like extremely powerful, which maybe if you're listening and you're thinking about wanting to work on a really cool product that you use every day, that's a really cool way to apply, right? It's just being like, I use this, just I want to make it better, right? I have so many ideas. Let's make it better together. And I think, again, going back to the diversity point, I think the thing that you really brought to the table was that analytics background. Tim and I, very early on, we realized that the caching alone is basically useless if you don't know what to cache, right? Because people have massive GraphQL schemas, right? People have hundreds, thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of types. And not all of them are cacheable or even worth caching, right? There's very much like a trade-off. Again, there's no ultimate solution, right? There's very much trade-off between like, you know, how often does that data change? and how public is the data, right? And the less often it changes and the more public it is, the better it is for caching. And the more often it changes and the more private it is, the worse it is for caching, right? The canonical example of a service that really doesn't use GraphCDN that I always use is error tracking. Because in an error tracking service like Sentry, they ingest a million events and then they aggregate them into like maybe 10 errors that just come up over and over again. And then an engineer looks at them once and then hopefully solves them, right, in the ideal case. And maybe looks at them, or they look at them like once or twice, but it's very little, right? And the read to write ratio is like, 100 to 1 writes to reads, if not even more. Where on the other end of the extreme spectrum would be, for example, a news website, right? And a news website is super read heavy and doesn't get written to very often, right? And an author writes an article once and then it gets read by millions of people, ideally, right? That's what the news organizations wants. So they have like a very public and very read heavy use case, and so those are much better for caching. And what we realized, long story short, is that most GraphQL schemas have a little bit of everything, right? Most GraphQL schemas, like an e-commerce shop, they have a little bit of really public data, like which products do we have, how much do they cost, what are the reviews. All of that is basically the same for everyone, and usually it doesn't change that frequently, although now it's also starting to be more and more and more dynamic, but still, it's relatively read heavy and relatively public data. Whereas on the other end of the spectrum for an e-commerce shop is a shopping cart. The shopping cart is super specific to you, and you'll probably add like 5-6 products to the shopping cart before even looking at it once, and then hopefully you check out. So that is, again, very private and very write heavy, and so caching that doesn't make any sense. And so anyways, what we realized was that we have to help people understand what even to cache, right? That people didn't even understand their own schema. They didn't know what was valuable to cache. And so we very quickly realized we need to build GraphQL analytics, and we built some really basic analytics, mainly optimized for just helping people to cache. And so when Thomas, when you applied, we were like, oh, that's super interesting. That's not even a use case we considered, this whole GDPR thing and like using server-side logs to do basically Google Analytics. That's super interesting. I don't know if we want to go down that path, but it's like an interesting route to explore for us, right? And so we were super excited when you applied. And I think you still, to this day, actually I would probably have to ask Tim if this is true, but for a long time at least, and I think it's still true, you held the distinction for solving our bug challenge in the interview process the fastest. I remember we interviewed you, and one of the engineering interviews we do is that we put a bug into an open source library. And then we obviously have failing tests, and we go to our interviews and we're like, look, just do your failing tests, make the tests pass, right? Just fix this bug. And there's some people, usually it takes like 30 minutes, maybe 45 minutes because it's quite a tricky bug. Like it's actually not that trivial. You have to really go really deep into it. There's like multiple areas where it could be, but it's like in the end, it's one very specific place. And like you have to find that place, and it's quite tricky. And Thomas was done within like, I think 12 minutes, if I remember correctly, or something like 10 minutes. And Thomas just completely, Thomas just completely nailed that interview. Tim and I just looked at it and we're like, what? How did he find that bug so quickly? That's incredible. I still vividly remember that moment when we were actually sitting next to each other in person interviewing you, and we after the interview, we were just like, how did he we might have to decide a new interview. This was way too fast. This is supposed to take like 30 minutes to 45 minutes, not 10 minutes. What is going on here?
Maybe a bit of luck, I don't know. Just started looking at the right places from the get-go. Yeah. But that was a really good coding challenge. I also designed some of the coding interviews that we did at my previous job, and I really enjoyed the ones that you came up with, because it, for reference, the open source library was of course GraphQL.js. What else could it be at GraphCDN, right? And the other challenge was like building the playground UI, or basically like starting from scratch and like seeing how far you can go in like 1 hour. And I really enjoyed these challenges. It was, in my opinion, really well thought through, and also giving us candidates like a really good way of presenting our knowledge and showing what we got. So that was really cool.
We tried really hard to make them as real world as possible, right? Often you end up coming into an interview and it's something that is completely outside of anything you would normally do, right? And we're like, well, we'd much rather just see if you can actually do what we need you to do, right? Like what your job would be. Like that's what we're trying to figure out here. So let's try and find challenges that sort of represent that most closely, right? And fixing a really tricky bug in an open source project maybe isn't something you do every day, but it's definitely something you'll have to do eventually, right? Like it's something that's just is gonna happen because we have such a technical product. And so we were like, how can we most closely represent the work that you would do at GraphCDN and figure out how good you would be at that? That was really what those were designed for. Yep,
really like them. Hopefully, now that we're talking about it here, we have to come up with new challenges for everybody that's listening. Or we just don't talk about the solutions now.
Exactly. So now that you've been at GraphCDN for 6 months, coming from 6.5 years at Finanzchef at the same company, how has working here differed to maybe what you were used to? What unexpected things do you do every day, particularly given that we're like a distributed company spread all around the globe?
Like good first thing, basically remote work was new for me. Or like, of course, starting out with the COVID pandemic, working from home got normal to a certain degree, and required, of course, at given points. But still, we had an office in Munich, and switching from the office to completely working remotely was something actually on my contra list. So like I enjoyed the office, I enjoyed meeting up with my colleagues every day, playing.
I didn't know that.
Table soccer. And yeah, was a bit hard to let go. I arranged a mutual agreement that I could use it as a co-working space, because the office was like we had enough space for the whole company to fit in there, and now with a more hybrid setup, it's not gonna be full at like almost every day. So. I do have to do that more often, actually, now that we're talking about it. But anyway, like that's the most obvious thing that changed. In terms of like company size, it was also quite the step down. At Finanzchef we were like, I guess 50 somewhat employees when I left, and I think almost 10 or like. With myself, it was 10 engineers, I guess. And of course, like GraphCDN was way smaller. We're still at nine people now, and 4 engineers. So that was also something that I actually was looking quite forward to. Seeing a company at this completely different stage, where it's more about like. Figuring out where to go and not yet as clear as what to do. What I really was, I was really blown away by the fact that we were, like the week that I joined, for the record, I was like probably the last of the initial hires to finally join with a 3 months notice period in, which is like common in German. So it actually took me quite some time after quitting until I really started working at GraphCDN. And once I joined, I think like in the first 2 weeks, I had like, it felt like 20 hours meeting of the 40-hour work week, because we did so many sessions about strategy, values, vision, mission, and all the stuff. So I mean, like, I enjoyed these sessions. Like, don't get me wrong, it was really valuable to talk about them. And coming from my previous company, these terms vision and mission were basically unheard of in the first years where I was working at that company. It was never at all this transparent and this kind of company culture built around a central, why do we even exist? And I joined GraphCDN, and it was like clear from the get-go, why does this company exist? And it also wasn't like written in stone. It wasn't like that you and Tim as founders said, vision, mission, let's get to work. It was very collaborative. Like actually, like everybody had to give an opinion. Like it really felt like that. And also everybody wanted to give an opinion on this. It wanted to shape the company, and that already showed me from my first week what an amazing team you two have brought together, which was really exciting for me because it was very different in terms of the kinds of people compared to what I have working before, and like not better or worse. It's like you can't compare it, but different and new, and which was really exciting for me.
I love that. I think to me and Tim, it's very obvious that as a young company, in order for us to succeed, we just have to hire the best people, right? That also came up in Tim's interview actually, where I think one of our core philosophies, maybe even, right, like one of our like maybe top 3 values that just Tim and I have as founders is being really people focused, right? We think that we only have a chance to succeed if we can hire the best people and we can put them in a work environment where they can do their best work, right? And you know, there's a lot of gospel out there. People are like, your company should feel like a family and whatever. And I don't subscribe to any of that. I don't think a company should be like a family. We're really more like a sports team, right? We want to have the best people, and then we want to make sure that they have the tools they need in order to do the best job that they can, right? And similarly, like a sports team, you can't always be sprinting, right? No sprinter sprints their whole life, right? Like it's always like when you look at a sports team, it's always like they're training over many years and trying to get to be as good as they can as a team, and then also on an individual level, right? And so a lot of what we do actually is we try to invest in our people. We try to find the best people we can, and then we try to put them in an environment where they can do their best work and we can help them level up. For example, through we've rolled out coaching for everyone, right? And everybody gets a coach. And that's just, you know, to us it's obvious, right? Like we want the people that work at Graph to be better. It's so worth it to just invest into Thomas and the other engineers and into everybody that's here and try and level everybody across the company up so that we as a team become better. That's 15 times more worth it than trying to find another person that will solve all of our problems, because that's never going to happen, right? And so I love that you called that out. I think to us that really is one of the core values that we have.
I mean, I love that you call it out and you make it explicit. It's something that probably not everybody and not every company, or most certainly not every company, does it like this intentionally. Like you just mentioned the coaching, which I feel like it's totally. I was amazed by when you announced it. You want to make this happen for all us employees at the company, because it's like. I mean, we can make it happen because we are still quite the small team, but still it's something you can't at all take for granted, I felt like. And something I also really enjoyed. And like after having this coaching now or talking with my coach for 2 months, it's a really great way to grow, because it's also not tied to any company objectives, but it's space and an opportunity for me as a person to grow. And as you said, it's like the most natural way to grow a company, by growing the people who make up the company. It's really great.
Yeah. To me, all of these early employees, right? Everybody who's joined up to this point, and maybe even for a little bit longer, right? Those are the people that will set the foundations of our entire culture. As we grow, as a company grows, it's just everything we do now is setting the tone for the next 50 people that are already. There's this analogy that an advisor of ours, Drodio, uses, right? There's a whole room full of people right over there, where there's 50 or maybe even 100 people sitting there. You haven't met them yet, but they're the next people that are going to join the company, right? It's inevitable. And so everything we're doing today is already thinking ahead. What tone does that set for those next 50 to 100 people, right? And another thing we say quite often that Sue, our head of ops and people, came up with is that we're kind of the mightiest team of 9 you might have ever met, right? We're doing things that are very, I would say, that feel totally obvious to me, right? Like the coaching is just like, when we came up with that, when we were like, yeah, that's, well, obviously we would do this, right? Like it makes total sense, right? It was just like, of course, like the people first, we want to level our people up. Coaching, yeah, makes total sense, right? So to us, it's really obvious, but it's actually really unusual, right? And I think we're doing a lot of things very unusually that we don't even know anymore, right? Like I certainly don't. I spend so much time thinking about how can we be better, that it's very hard for me to reflect on, okay, which of this is actually unusual, right? One of our companies actually maybe unlike anything else.
Yeah, I think you two, you and Tim, really created a company that also has the means of making this happen. which is really amazing. And also not just like using this to immediately scale the company up to 100, 500 employees, but like investing in the people and not just trying to win the race as quickly as possible by getting more and more people on board and solving I don't know the first best problem you can come up with. The way we think all these things through here is something that I really also something I really took or learned from. Yeah.
All right, Thomas, I have one last question for you. As you think about your next, let's say 6 months, maybe a year, maybe 3 years, I won't hold you to a specific time frame, but just the future, what are you excited about in terms of Graph City, and what is particularly exciting to you as you look, the next maybe year ahead? What are you excited about?
You mentioned it at the beginning, we're at our offsite right now in Lisbon, and having like the perfect chance to talk or to make a lot of sessions that work way better in person. And actually, I think like almost the first thing that we did was coming up with a really big mind map of stickies that we stuck to the wall in the lobby downstairs, where we mapped out the problem space, basically going through I don't know 2-3 dozens of calls you and Tim had with actual customers, and just writing down in plain English what problems did these customers face, skipping over any kind of solution, either like if we already provide a solution for it, or if the customer like talked or called out a specific solution, just focusing on the problems. And like it's a huge wall, and there's a lot of things on it. And I mean, sounds a bit daunting, but we have the chance to we are in a position where we see all these things, and we actually can make a lot of that happen, or like come up with solutions that help a lot of people with these problems that they have today, which is really, or I'm really looking forward to what we can make happen. Actually, in fact, I think the impact that we're gonna have in the next year will hopefully, if everything goes smoothly, will hopefully be even solving more problems than just the ones that we stuck to that wall in this week, which is something that I really look forward to. And the other thing which I'm really excited about is now that we are actually that it's getting clearer and clearer what we actually want to achieve, what our mission is, which is also something that we talked about on this offsite, by the way. We are about to also start scaling up the company and try to solve these problems even quicker. And the scaling of an early stage company is something that I have never experienced before, and I'm really excited for this to happen, and to get to know even more, hopefully amazing people in the process, and also to, like you said, the values that we aligned on as an early team, to pass that on and to enable even more people here at Graph City, and to like really make the best out of their day-to-day job, and to have as much fun and to learn as many things as I already did in the past 6 months. So I hope, I really hope that it's gonna be a lot of work, probably, and in some way, the scaling will probably also distract us from working at the actual problems, just like given the overhead of getting new people on board. But still, I'm really looking forward to it, and yeah, growing as a person at the company, growing together with the company, seeing the company grow, and in the end, being able to solve a lot of problems that we already see today, and hopefully even more that we don't yet even see.
I love everything you just said. I think what really sticks out to me and why I'm so excited about getting up every morning and working at GraphCDN is the size of the opportunity ahead, right? And we didn't even know this. We didn't found the company knowing, oh, there's all these many problems in the GraphQL space that we could solve maybe, right? It was just like, we had this problem with edge caching and we wanted to solve it. We also need analytics. Okay, now we've got like basic analytics and edge caching, and we made that better over the last year. And now we really sat down and we were like, we talked with many of our customers and we're like, what else? What other problems do you face, right? There's so many things that are unsolved that we can do to really enable even more developers to change the world, right? Which is our vision. And I think really that we sat down this week and we mapped out this huge problem map just has me really energized, because I want to solve all of those problems, right? I want to go through and solve every single one of those problems for people so they don't have to solve them themselves. Often in our industry, if we don't solve the problem for people, they'll solve it themselves. Like you said in the beginning, right? You had to build this analytics, server-side analytics thing for Finanzchef, and you were like, why am I spending time on this, right? This is kind of ridiculous. This has nothing to do with us helping our customers. It's just for us internally. And that's how I feel about all of these problems. These are problems like caching, like analytics, that we can solve generically for everybody. So they can just focus on whatever they want to focus on, right? Just building the best product. And that to me is incredibly energizing, and I can't wait to meet the 50 people that are in the next room over, whose faces we don't know yet, and introduce them to all of you great in this first early team. All right, one more quick note before you listener head out. We are hiring across the board. If any of this, what we just talked about, if any of this behind the scenes look that you hopefully got appealed to you or sounded interesting to you, hit us up. We're still working on job descriptions. They're always in flux. There's always more coming. If you go to our careers page, graphcdn.io/careers, check out what's there. But even if nothing's there that suits your specific experience, just hit us up, right? Just send us a message and be like, look, here's what I do. Here's how I think I can help GraphCDN. Just like Thomas did when he was like, there was no job description there, right? I was just like, I like this product. I want to work at this company. I think I have some really interesting ideas. Let's talk, right? So just go do the same thing. We love getting those emails and we love chatting with you and figuring out if maybe there's a fit. And even if there isn't a fit right now, even if we don't need what you do right now, we will need it eventually, right? That's basically a given. We're going to need everything eventually. And so whenever that then comes up, then we already have you in our head and we can go, oh, we now need this. I remember speaking with that person way back. Let's reach out again and see what their situation is like. Let's have another conversation. And so please, just go to our careers page, check it out, and then hit us up and let us know what you can do and how you think we can help, and then we can figure out how that fits into our plan. Thomas, thank you so much for joining this interview. This was really, really, really fun, and I'll see you downstairs for a beer.
Thank you, Max. Thank you for making this happen, and yeah, let's grab a beer.
All right, bye everybody.
Bye-bye.